What happens when a confident entrepreneur walks into a talk show expecting a meaningful discussion, only to face a host determined to discredit her? Maya Carter wasn't just a businesswoman. She was a force of nature. At only 32, she had built a thriving empire from the ground up, not just for herself, but for the countless young women she mentored. When she received an invitation to appear on the Morning Forum, one of the country's most watched talk shows, she saw it as an opportunity to share her vision. But sitting across from her was Victoria Hensley, a host notorious for stirring controversy. What should have been a conversation about empowerment quickly turned into an interrogation designed to undermine her work. Yet, what Victoria didn't anticipate was that Maya had come prepared. And what happened next? No one, least of all Victoria, was ready for the clapback that would shake the room.
Before we dive into today's story, we'd love your support. If you enjoy our content, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment below sharing your thoughts. Your engagement helps us create more inspiring stories just for you. Now, without further ado, let's get started.
Maya Carter wasn't just an entrepreneur. She was a force of nature. At 32 years old, she had accomplished what many only dreamed of. From humble beginnings selling handmade jewelry at flea markets, she had built Carter & Co., a multi-million-dollar business that specialized in sustainable fashion and ethical manufacturing. But Maya's vision extended far beyond profit. For her, success was meaningless if it didn't create opportunities for others. Her latest initiative, the Rising Futures program, was her proudest achievement yet. The program provided mentorship, grants, and networking opportunities for young Black women looking to break into the business world. It wasn't charity, it was empowerment. Maya understood firsthand the barriers these women faced, and she was determined to break them down, one opportunity at a time. When she received an invitation to appear on the Morning Forum, she saw it as the perfect platform to share her mission. The talk show, known for its massive national audience, had the power to amplify her message and attract new support. But there was one thing Maya didn't overlook: Victoria Hensley, the show's host. Victoria wasn't just a journalist, she was a provocateur, a media personality who thrived on controversy. With her perfectly styled blonde bob and icy blue eyes, she was the kind of interviewer who could make or break a guest with a single question. While some admired her tough approach, others saw her as a master manipulator, skilled at twisting narratives to fit her agenda. Still, Maya wasn't intimidated. She had faced bigger challenges than a hostile interviewer. If anything, she welcomed the debate. The Los Angeles studio was buzzing with activity when Maya arrived. Cameras, lighting crews, and producers moved in a well-orchestrated dance. The makeup artist who prepped her chair gave her an approving nod. "You look radiant," she said, dusting a light powder over Maya's deep brown skin. Maya smiled. "Thanks. Feels like a big day." The nerves were there, bubbling beneath the surface, but she wouldn't let them show. She had spent years walking into rooms where people doubted her. This was no different. A production assistant led her to the stage, where the audience murmured in anticipation. The set was sleek and modern, with a high-gloss table positioned under the bright studio lights. Victoria was already seated, her signature smirk in place as she adjusted the stack of cue cards in front of her. As Maya took her seat, Victoria leaned in with an artificial warmth. "Maya Carter, ladies and gentlemen," she announced, prompting a round of applause. "A self-made businesswoman who says she's rewriting the rules of entrepreneurship. Welcome to the Morning Forum." Maya matched her tone with a poised smile. "Thank you, Victoria. I'm happy to be here and excited to share the work we're doing." The first few minutes of the interview were cordial enough. Maya spoke about her early years, her passion for business, and the challenges she faced as a young Black woman in an industry dominated by people who didn't look like her. Victoria nodded along, occasionally interjecting with questions that, so far, felt routine. But Maya wasn't naive. She sensed a shift, a subtle change in Victoria's body language, the way her eyes gleamed as if waiting for the right moment to pounce. And then, like a snake coiling before striking, Victoria tilted her head and asked the first loaded question. "So, Maya," she said, voice dripping with manufactured curiosity, "would you say programs like yours exist because people in your community aren't working hard enough on their own?" The energy in the room changed in an instant. The audience, once relaxed, grew tense. Some people clapped reflexively, others shifted in their seats. The cameras zoomed in, capturing every flicker of reaction. Maya inhaled slowly. She had been expecting this. Maybe not this exact question, but something close to it. She smiled, keeping her voice steady. "It's not about people not working hard enough, Victoria. It's about recognizing the systemic barriers that exist and creating pathways so that talent, determination, and drive don't go to waste." There was a beat of silence before a pocket of the audience broke into applause. Victoria's smirk deepened. "Interesting perspective," she mused. "But surely you can understand why some people feel like focusing on systemic barriers sounds like an excuse. After all, isn't the American dream built on the idea of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps?" Maya had heard this argument before, too many times to count. And she had the perfect response. She leaned forward slightly, locking eyes with Victoria. "The American dream is beautiful in theory, but it doesn't account for the fact that some people have more hurdles to jump than others. A pair of boots is great, but what if they don't have laces? Or worse, what if those boots were stolen before they even had the chance to wear them?" A wave of laughter and applause erupted from a section of the audience. Victoria's expression tightened just slightly, her eyes flickering toward the producers behind the camera. She had been expecting a fight. She hadn't been expecting to lose ground so quickly. Maya could feel the energy shifting, but she knew this was only the beginning. Victoria was far from finished, and neither was she. The stage lights glowed under the pristine set of the morning forum, casting an artificial warmth over the sleek glass table where Maya Carter and Victoria Hensley sat across from each other. The audience murmured with anticipation, their eyes darting between the poised entrepreneur and the sharp-tongued talk show host, well aware that moments like these often sparked controversy. Victoria turned to the camera, flashing her trademark smile, a practiced, polished expression that never quite reached her eyes. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began smoothly, her voice carrying the effortless confidence of a seasoned broadcaster. "This morning, we have a very special guest, Maya Carter, a self-made businesswoman who says she's rewriting the rules of entrepreneurship and paving the way for a new generation of leaders. Maya, welcome." Maya returned the smile, effortlessly poised. "Thank you, Victoria. I'm thrilled to be here and excited to talk about the work we're doing." Victoria leaned in slightly, folding her hands atop the table. "Now, Maya, you have quite the impressive story," she said. "You built a multi-million-dollar company from the ground up. Quite the feat. Tell us, what was the driving force behind your success?" For the first few minutes, the conversation followed a predictable pattern. Maya spoke about her early days, selling handmade jewelry at street markets, and how those experiences taught her the fundamentals of business. She shared how she reinvested her profits, scaled her operations, and, through relentless perseverance, built a fashion empire. Victoria nodded along, offering occasional affirmations that seemed polite enough. "That's truly inspiring," she said, though there was something just a little too rehearsed about her enthusiasm. Then, as seamlessly as a tide turning, the tone of the interview shifted. Victoria tilted her head, a subtle smirk tugging at the corner of her lips. Now, Maya, she began, voice adopting an almost patronizing lilt. You've built something incredible. But let's talk about your latest endeavor. This program you've launched for young Black women. Why focus exclusively on one group? Isn't success about hard work and resilience, regardless of background? The room's energy tightened. The question was posed casually, but Maya recognized it for what it was. A carefully placed provocation. She met Victoria's gaze, unflinching. Success is about hard work and resilience, she agreed, her voice even. But it's also about opportunity. Talent is evenly distributed, but access to resources isn't. My program exists to address that gap. A few audience members clapped, though the room remained largely still, waiting for Victoria's next move. The host's smirk deepened. Right, but wouldn't you say that people who really want to succeed will find a way? I mean, look at you. You didn't need a special program, did you? Maya exhaled slowly, refusing to let irritation seep into her tone. She had faced this argument before, framed in different ways, but always the same underlying premise. Well, Victoria, she said smoothly, that's the thing about success. When you make it, people like to act as if the obstacles you faced don't exist anymore. But I didn't get here alone. I had mentors, I had people who believed in me, and yes, I faced systemic challenges that made the climb harder. What I'm doing now is making sure the next generation doesn't have to jump through as many hoops just to be seen. The audience stirred again, murmurs rippling through the seats. Victoria chuckled softly, shaking her head as if she were merely playing devil's advocate. I hear you. I do, she said, her tone syrupy. But let me ask you this. Wouldn't it be more productive to focus on unity rather than pointing out barriers? After all, isn't the American dream about pulling yourself up by your bootstraps? Maya nearly smiled. She had been waiting for this one. She leaned forward slightly, her voice calm but carrying the weight of an undeniable truth. The American dream is beautiful in theory, she said, but it assumes we all start from the same place. It assumes we all have boots. But what if those boots don't have laces? Or worse, what if they were taken away before we even had the chance to wear them? A pocket of laughter and applause erupted from a section of the audience. The energy in the room shifted, like the first rumble of thunder before a storm. Victoria's smirk wavered for just a fraction of a second. She glanced toward the producers behind the cameras, as if recalibrating. Maya could almost see the gears turning in her head. She had expected pushback, but she hadn't expected to lose control of the room so quickly. Still, Victoria was far from finished. She readjusted in her chair, eyes gleaming with calculated intent. That's a clever analogy, she conceded. But some might argue that programs like yours, while well-intentioned, just reinforce division. Why not open them up to everyone? Wouldn't that be more inclusive? Maya knew this tactic well. The false equivalency, the attempt to frame targeted support as exclusion. She exhaled quietly before answering. It's not exclusionary, Victoria. It's intentional. When a house has a leak in the roof, you don't renovate the entire structure. You fix the leak first. That's what my program does. It focuses on an issue that has been ignored for too long. The applause was louder this time. Victoria blinked, shifting in her seat. She wasn't used to being outmaneuvered, but Maya wasn't backing down. A flicker of something crossed the host's face, mild irritation perhaps, but she quickly masked it with another polished smile. Well, Victoria said, voice still laced with feigned curiosity. Some might say that programs like yours promote dependency, rather than self-sufficiency. How would you respond to that? Maya tilted her head slightly, her expression betraying just the faintest trace of amusement. She had played this game long enough to know exactly what was happening. She folded her hands on the table, her voice unwavering. Let me ask you something, Victoria, she said, her tone measured but sharp. When banks provide loans to entrepreneurs, is that dependency? Or is it an investment? Because that's what this is. An investment in people who are just as capable, just as driven, but who have historically been denied a fair shot. The audience erupted into applause, some members even standing. Victoria's expression tightened. She looked toward the cameras again, as if searching for a way to redirect the conversation. But Maya knew what had just happened. The tide had shifted. Victoria Hensley adjusted in her seat, her fingers lightly tapping against the glossy table. She was used to having control, to steering conversations in a way that made her guests squirm. But Maya Carter wasn't budging. She remained poised, her confidence unshaken, her responses precise and unflappable. Victoria's lips curled into a knowing smile, the kind that signaled she was about to take another swing. "I understand where you're coming from, Maya," she said, her tone shifting into something resembling diplomacy. "But don't you think that focusing so much on race just creates more division? Wouldn't it be better to focus on unity rather than pointing out differences?" The air in the studio thickened. A few audience members shifted uncomfortably, while others leaned in, waiting for Maya's response. Maya exhaled slowly before speaking, her voice carrying the weight of quiet authority. "Unity sounds wonderful, Victoria," she said, "but you can't build a bridge without first acknowledging the river you're trying to cross." There was a pause, a charged, heavy moment of silence before the audience erupted. Applause filled the studio, louder this time, more sustained. Even a few members of the production crew behind the cameras nodded subtly. Victoria blinked, caught off guard by the reaction. She had anticipated a measured response, but not one that would so swiftly shift the room's energy. Still, she wasn't one to back down. She straightened her posture, her eyes narrowing ever so slightly. "Well, Maya," she continued, forcing a chuckle, "that's certainly a creative way to put it. But let's talk specifics. Your program is targeted exclusively at young black women. Why not open it up to everyone? Isn't that, in a way, exclusionary?" Maya had been expecting this. She had lost count of how many times she had been asked some variation of this question, always framed as if intentional support for marginalized groups was somehow equivalent to discrimination. She kept her expression neutral, her tone unwavering. "It's not exclusionary, Victoria. It's intentional." Victoria arched an eyebrow, as if daring her to continue. "When you know where the gaps are, you address them directly," Maya explained. "If a house has a leak in the roof, you don't fix the entire house. You start where the problem is. My program isn't about shutting anyone out. It's about making sure that the people who have historically been shut out have a way in." Applause rippled through the audience again, and Maya could feel the energy continuing to shift in her favor. Victoria, however, wasn't done. Her grip on the conversation was slipping, and she knew it. She needed to regain control. She leaned back in her chair, folding her arms across her chest. "I hear you," she said, her voice adopting a slightly sharper edge. "But I'm just playing devil's advocate here. Some might argue that programs like yours promote dependency rather than self-sufficiency. After all, shouldn't success be about personal drive and perseverance?" Maya tilted her head slightly, her lips pressing together in what almost resembled amusement. Here it was, the classic pull yourself up by your bootstraps argument, dusted off and repackaged in yet another attempt to undermine the real issue. She folded her hands on the table, her voice steady. "Let me ask you something, Victoria," she said. "When banks provide loans to new entrepreneurs, is that dependency?" Victoria's lips parted slightly, as if about to respond, but Maya wasn't finished. "Or is it an investment?" she continued, her tone razor-sharp, "because that's what this program is. It's an investment in people who are just as capable, just as driven, but who have historically been denied access to the same opportunities. Giving people resources to succeed isn't creating dependency. It's leveling the playing field. A wave of applause surged through the audience, even louder this time. Victoria's expression tightened. She glanced briefly toward the producers behind the cameras, clearly recalibrating. Maya, on the other hand, remained perfectly composed. She had no intention of letting Victoria dictate the narrative. Victoria licked her lips, her fingers lightly drumming against the table. She needed another angle, a new approach. "Well, Maya," she said finally, forcing a smile, "you certainly have a way with words. But let's not ignore the fact that there are plenty of hard-working people out there, people of all backgrounds, who might look at what you're doing and feel left out. How do you justify leaving them behind? How is that fair?" Maya inhaled deeply, taking a brief moment before responding. Her voice, when she spoke, was calm but carried a quiet, deliberate intensity. "Fair," she repeated slowly, letting the words settle in the air between them. Then she leaned forward slightly, her eyes locking onto Victoria's with unshakable resolve. "Tell me something, Victoria," she said. "When a firefighter puts out a burning house, do we accuse them of being unfair to the houses that aren't on fire? Or do we thank them for protecting the neighborhood?" The silence that followed was deafening. For the first time, Victoria had no immediate comeback. The question wasn't just rhetorical, it was surgical, cutting straight to the core of the flawed argument she had been pushing. The audience sat in stunned silence for a brief moment before breaking into thunderous applause. Some members even rose to their feet, clapping enthusiastically. The energy in the room was no longer in Victoria's favor. It belonged entirely to Maya. Victoria's polished facade faltered, just slightly, but enough for those watching closely to notice. She readjusted in her chair, clearing her throat. "Well," she said, forcing another tight smile, "that's certainly one way to look at it." Maya smiled, but there was no malice in her expression, only certainty. "And it's the truth," she said simply. The applause swelled again. Victoria's eyes flickered toward the teleprompter, her mind clearly racing to find a way to regain footing. But deep down, she already knew. She had lost this round, and Maya Carter had just made history. Victoria Hensley was losing. She could feel it. The energy in the room had shifted, slipping through her fingers like sand. Maya Carter wasn't just holding her ground, she was commanding the space, effortlessly dismantling every veiled attack with precision and poise. Victoria had built her career on being able to control the narrative, on backing her guests into rhetorical corners they couldn't escape. But this wasn't going the way she had planned. She needed a final blow, a last-ditch effort to wrestle back control. She inhaled sharply and sat up straighter, tilting her head in a way that feigned curiosity, but masked frustration. "Maya," she began, her voice syrupy smooth, "let me ask you something." Maya raised an eyebrow slightly, but remained silent, waiting. "Some might argue that programs like yours, while well-intentioned, are really just another form of segregation," Victoria said, her lips curling into a smirk. "I mean, think about it. We live in a time where everyone wants to feel included. But by focusing solely on black women, aren't you doing the exact thing that so many have fought against for decades?" The words hung in the air like a match hovering over gasoline. The audience collectively inhaled. A few heads turned, whispers rustling through the crowd. Someone in the back let out a soft, incredulous, "Wow." Maya didn't flinch, not even a fraction. She had been waiting for this moment. She could see it in Victoria's eyes, the desperate attempt to turn the tide, to spin the conversation into something else, something toxic. And Maya wasn't about to let that happen. Her expression remained composed as she folded her hands on the table and leaned in slightly, her voice carrying the clarity of a woman who refused to be misrepresented. "Victoria," she said calmly, "segregation was about shutting people out. My program is about opening doors." The room erupted. Applause thundered through the studio, rising like a wave, cresting over the audience as they clapped and cheered. Some people stood, others whistled. It wasn't just approval, it was a shift. Victoria's smirk twitched. She hadn't expected that. Maya let the applause settle before continuing, her voice even, unwavering. "What I'm doing isn't about division," she said. "It's about correction. It's about addressing the barriers that have existed for far too long. When you see a community that's been denied resources, ignored, and left to fend for itself, the solution isn't to say, well, let's just treat everyone the same now and pretend the past didn't happen. No, the solution is to invest in the people who were pushed aside for generations. Because when we lift them up, we lift up everyone." More applause, louder. Victoria clenched her jaw, forcing another smile, but the cracks were starting to show. She glanced toward the producers behind the cameras, as if searching for an escape hatch, a way to steer the conversation back in her favor. But there wasn't one. Maya was in control now. Victoria cleared her throat, feigning nonchalance. "I see your point," she said, though her voice was noticeably tighter. "But surely you understand why some people might feel left out, why they might feel like they're being excluded." Maya tilted her head slightly. She could end this right here, and so she did. Her voice was soft but carried an unmistakable weight. "Tell me, Victoria," she said, "when firefighters put out a burning house, do we accuse them of being unfair to the houses that aren't on fire? Or do we thank them for protecting the neighborhood?" Silence. Absolute deafening silence. For the first time, Victoria Hensley had no response. No smirk, no quick-witted retort. Nothing. The camera zoomed in on her face, catching the moment her expression faltered. Just slightly, just enough. Her lips parted, then closed again. She blinked, scrambling for words that wouldn't come. And then, the audience exploded. It wasn't just applause anymore. It was cheering, whistling, stomping. People in the front row leapt to their feet. Even some members of the production crew behind the cameras were nodding, whispering to each other. The moment was sealed. Victoria forced a laugh, a thin, brittle sound. "Well, Maya," she said, gripping the armrest of her chair as if steadying herself, "you're certainly passionate." Maya smiled, not out of arrogance, but out of certainty. "I'm passionate about the truth," she said simply. Victoria let out a breath, shifting in her seat. "I think we'll have to agree to disagree on some points," she said, her voice carrying a strained civility. Maya nodded. "That's fine," she replied, her tone polite yet firm. "But at least we had the conversation." And that was it. The producers cut to commercial, but by then, it was already too late. The damage had been done. By the time the cameras stopped rolling, the internet had already begun its work. Clips of Maya's responses flooded social media. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Everywhere people were sharing, reacting, celebrating. Maya Carter was trending before she even left the studio. Victoria Hensley had walked into that interview thinking she would expose Maya Carter. Instead, she had just made her a legend. The moment the cameras stopped rolling, the energy in the studio lingered like the final note of a symphony. Even as production crew members bustled about, wrapping up the segment, it was clear that something monumental had just happened. But Maya Carter barely had a moment to process it before her phone began buzzing. The first notification was a text from her assistant. "You're trending everywhere." Then came another, and another. And then, her phone screen flooded with alerts. Incoming calls and messages. Somewhere in the background, Victoria Hensley slipped off set, her composure still intact, but her expression noticeably strained. She may have maintained a diplomatic exit, but the damage had already been done, and the world was watching. Within minutes, clips from the interview were spreading like wildfire. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all flooded with snippets of Maya's sharpest responses. You can't build a bridge without acknowledging the river. Segregation was about shutting people out. My program is about opening doors. When firefighters put out a burning house, do we accuse them of being unfair to the houses that aren't on fire? The phrases were being quoted, retweeted, and reshared at lightning speed. The hashtags #Maya Carter and #Morning Forum Clapback shot to the top of trending lists worldwide. Public reaction was immediate. Maya Carter just gave a masterclass in grace under fire. A viral tweet with 500k likes. She ate, no crumbs left. A TikTok user stitching together Maya's best responses, hitting 1 million views in under an hour. I need Maya Carter to run for president, immediately. An Instagram comment under a post reshared by a major activist. And it wasn't just social media. By the time Maya left the studio and settled into her car, mainstream media had already begun dissecting the moment. CNN's headline, Maya Carter's fiery exchange on the Morning Forum sparks national conversation on equity. The New York Times, Maya Carter redefines the conversation on systemic barriers and goes viral doing it. Forbes, why Maya Carter's business model and her bold response could change the future of entrepreneurship. Political analysts, cultural critics, and talk show hosts debated the impact of the exchange. Some praised Maya for her poise and intelligence, calling it one of the most important interviews in recent television history. Others, predictably, accused her of being too aggressive, a criticism she had heard before and had long stopped entertaining. But the overwhelming response was clear. Maya Carter had just shifted the national conversation. Then, the endorsements started rolling in. High-profile figures were weighing in. Michelle Obama reposted a clip of Maya's interview adding, "Powerful words. The fight for access and equity isn't over. Leaders like Maya Carter are proof that we're just getting started." Oprah Winfrey tweeted, "This woman's words need to be heard. If you missed Maya Carter's interview today, do yourself a favor and watch." Beyoncé's Instagram story simply read, "When firefighters put out a burning house," alongside a fire emoji. Even major business leaders took notice. Shark Tank investor Mark Cuban tweeted, "Maya Carter just gave the best pitch I've ever seen. And it wasn't even for a company. That's leadership." It was official. Maya Carter wasn't just a viral sensation. She was a movement. But as the world continued to explode with reactions, Maya sat in the quiet of her hotel room, her phone still vibrating with endless notifications. She wasn't basking in victory. She wasn't replaying the moment in her head. Instead, she was thinking about what came next. For her, the interview wasn't about proving a point. It wasn't about winning an argument. It was about impact. It was about every young woman who had ever been told she wasn't enough. It was about every entrepreneur who had been shut out of rooms they deserved to be in. It was about every person who had been denied resources, opportunities, and access. Not because they lacked talent, but because the system wasn't built with them in mind. Her assistant knocked gently on the hotel door before poking her head inside. "CNN just picked up the story," she said. "They're calling it one of the most powerful TV moments of the year." Maya exhaled, shaking her head slightly. "It's not about me," she said quietly. "It's about the message." Her assistant smiled knowingly. "Still," she said, holding up Maya's phone, "you might want to see this." Maya glanced at the screen. Beyoncé had just shared the clip. Maya laughed. Really laughed. The weight of the day lifting for just a moment. "Well," she said, leaning back against the couch, "I guess I can't argue with Queen Bey." But even as the world celebrated her words, Maya knew this was just the beginning. The real work, the work that mattered, was only getting started. Maya Carter stepped off the plane, the crisp evening air of her hometown wrapping around her like a familiar embrace. The past 48 hours had been a whirlwind. Media frenzy, viral fame, endless phone calls. But none of that mattered as much as this moment. She was home. As she walked through the airport terminal, she spotted a small crowd waiting near the exit. Young women from the Rising Futures program, the initiative she had built from the ground up. The moment they saw her, cheers erupted. "Maya," someone called. She barely had time to react before Jasmine Reynolds, one of the program's brightest mentees, rushed forward. Jasmine, just 19 years old, was a first-generation college student and a young entrepreneur with dreams of launching her own sustainable beauty brand. She had always carried herself with quiet determination, but today her emotions were raw, her eyes glistening with tears. "Maya," Jasmine choked out, clutching her phone in her hand, the interview still open on the screen. "I watched everything. I saw how you stood up for us, for all of us." Maya felt her own throat tighten. Jasmine took a shaky breath. I just want to say thank you, because for the first time in my life, I feel like I can. Like I belong. Like I don't have to keep proving myself to people who will never see me." Maya placed a gentle hand on Jasmine's shoulder. "You don't need me to make you feel that way," she said softly. "That power? It's already inside you. All I'm doing is making sure you see it for yourself." Jasmine nodded, wiping her tears, and Maya saw something shift in her expression. Resolve. That's what this was about. Not viral fame, not trending hashtags. It was about this moment, about every young woman who finally realized she didn't have to shrink herself to make others comfortable. Maya turned to the rest of the group, her voice steady but full of passion. "The world isn't always going to hand you respect or fairness," she said. "Sometimes you have to demand it. Sometimes you have to take up space even when people try to push you out." She let her words settle before continuing. "But here's the thing, when you refuse to back down, when you stand firm in who you are, you don't just change your own life. You change the world around you." The group was silent for a moment, but it wasn't emptiness. It was understanding. Maya saw it in their faces. They were ready. This was just the beginning, and that was all the confirmation she needed that the fight was worth it. Let me know if you approve this section, and I'll proceed with conclusion. The bigger message. Maya Carter's story is more than just a viral moment. It's proof that standing firm in your truth can shift conversations, challenge narratives, and inspire change. Her success wasn't just about building a business. It was about creating space for others to thrive. The world isn't always fair. The systems in place don't always give equal opportunities. But that doesn't mean we stop fighting. It means we fight harder. Whether on national television or in everyday life, using your voice matters. If Maya's journey resonated with you, ask yourself, what can I do? Maybe it's mentoring someone, starting an initiative, or simply speaking up when it's easier to stay silent. Change doesn't start with one person. It starts with all of us. So today, take a step. Be bold. Because the fight for equity doesn't belong to just Maya. It belongs to all of us.